So first of all, thank you very much for coming tonight. It's a pleasure for me to be your host for the 5th time. I'm Christian, I'm a partner at Eventures, and it's really a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to again work together with the fantastic Startup Notes team on this format from scratch, where we are trying to actually unlock the secrets of specific fields in the startup world from leading investors and entrepreneurs. Today we have a very exciting topic. We are talking about how to raise money, and I couldn't be more excited to have some amazing guests here today that I know for many, many years, and I've had the pleasure to work together with them in many, many different occasions. It's a pleasure for me to say that having a very reputable business angel here with Christian Vollmann, and the leading entrepreneur who has started some of the most reputable, most successful German internet companies so far, including eDarling and MyVideo, and nowadays as the CEO and founder of nebenan.de, and a very close friend of mine and probably like my most famous VC investor in all over Europe, Gloria from Index Ventures, one exceptional fund. And I think getting both of these perspectives from the entrepreneur and business angel side, and as well as from the VC side, is really something incredibly special. And yeah, please welcome Gloria and Christian, and please join me up on stage. All right. So, Gloria, Christian, today's topic is why and how to raise money. And I would like to start with this question to you, Gloria. Why should founders raise money at all?
It's a great question that we are also always asking our founders whenever we meet them. I think there are 3 things that I've seen that I think is really good reasons to raise capital. One is you could otherwise not do it. You just have to have an upfront investment. You have to, for example, get a banking license or an insurance license, or you just have to invest in product. And because you are a relatively young founder, you just don't have the capital to do that yourself up front. The second opportunity, or the second reason, which I find actually the most compelling, is that there is a window of opportunity that is presenting itself to you, which will be gone if it takes too long. So we've seen a lot of really successful bootstrap businesses like ThinkCell, for example, here in Berlin, that have grown into like multi-million dollar businesses, and it made a lot of sense for them because it was a small enough market that not a lot of people went after it. But once you are really targeting a large market that you see a lot of people go for, typically there's only a short window of opportunity, and you need to accelerate your investment in your product development. So that's a great reason. And I think the third reason is really to create trust, both in terms of with talent that you want to hire. They usually want to see that you are able to get capital into the company so that the company still exists in 6 months or in 12 months. And secondly, also for customers, especially on the software side, a lot of customers, when you are selling to a Siemens or to any other large enterprise customer, they want to be ensured that you're still going to be around in 2 years and that the product is still maintained. So typically we see those 3 reasons. But what I think is the more relevant reason is to our question to ask is, when is the right time to raise, right? I think a lot of people raise probably at the wrong moment in time and for the wrong reasons. And so for me, I would more ask myself, is now the right time where I can use the money and really accelerate growth, or really accelerate hiring, etc.? Or does it make more sense to keep burn low, or even to be profitable and to really work on the product and then probably raise funding 6 or 12 months down the line?
Christian, the 3 reasons that Gloria has just mentioned, and when is the right time, from your experience as a business angel and founder, what was the right time for you in both of the occasions?
In terms of timing, my advice would be to try to avoid taking money as long as you can, until you've proven a few things to yourself, but also to the outside world. The more things you can prove, the more proof points in terms of traction, proof of concept, etc., product market fit you can actually present, the better negotiating position you have. And that, of course, is also a big determinant in when it's the right time. And of course, when you have the feeling that you are in the situation that this is a great opportunity, and there's a window of opportunity that's open now, but probably not for a long time, then you should definitely go for it.
Okay, so let's assume that we have decided as a founder that we would like to raise money. Now, like, this is my first round of funding, and there are several sources of capital available. So what would you go for? Like, there's different opportunities to do it, like family and friends, business angels, you could get grants, you could work with accelerators, and you could maybe even get a VC on board in your very first round. So what is your experience, and how would you shape that?
Yeah, it depends on a lot of different factors. So it really depends on your personal situation. Do you have own money that you can invest, or are you a student who has to pay off his student loan, right, and are already indebted? Do you have family and friends who have some money and are willing to back you with that money? Do you get from an accelerator or a company builder, do you get more than just money? Do you actually get access to talent and you know, to maybe strategic input that you can work with, or technology that you can use? Or is there maybe another reason to work with those players than just the money, but also access to something you need, a resource you need? So it really depends on a lot of factors. And then you have to take into account that there is big differences in terms of how fast do you get money from these different sources. So speed is one question to ask yourself. How tedious is the process? You know, how big is the due diligence? How many forms do you have to fill in to get the grant? These kind of things. And so it's a big decision to think about how much time can I actually spend on fundraising versus building my business, because that's, as a founder, what I've learned is that you really want to spend as little time as possible on the fundraising process, although that's very hard to actually do. But yeah, I think in the end it is a distraction from, you know, building the business and running operations.
So let's now bring these two perspectives together. Like, we have now a business model that we believe is ready to actually raise money from, and we have decided that this business is maybe an outlier from the VC side. So how do we both now bring our interests together by actually deciding how much money do we want to raise? So how would you go about actually making the decision how much money you need? And I would be really curious to hear later on how you would see this.
Well, Gloria said it, you're betting on outliers, and the earlier you are in the process, the more risky it is, the less you know which one is going to be the outlier. So now, this is hard for Index. Now imagine how hard it is for a business angel who is like the first person to ever see this idea and talk to the founder when there's nothing there but the idea and the founder. So it is highly risky, and you know, we're looking for proof points along the way, for milestones. And I think that's exactly how the founder should look at it and say, one day I want to be Series A ready. So where do I need to be Series A ready? How many, I don't know, users do I need to have? How many customers? How much revenue? Whatever it is, and then work your way back. Okay, to be there in 3 years, where do I need to have to be in 2 years, in 1 year, and how do I get there? And then really work with milestones. So what does my proof of concept look like? Is that that my product is live? Is that my first users using it? Is it my engagement KPIs? Is it my first, how many paying customers I have, how much revenue I do? Is it my churn rate? You know, is it a combination of those things? What do I actually want to prove, and how does my product market fit proof looks like? And then plan for that, and then ask myself, okay, how much money do I need to get there? How much money do I need for this milestone A, milestone B? And that's the amount you should raise, I think.
So let's now assume that we have exactly the situation that Christian has described earlier. So he's putting in a little bit of his own money into a business and has the conviction of building it and like keeping the burn rate low. And now he wants to raise money from Index, but decides that he just wants to dilute 5%. So this is not a deal for you. How would you go about it?
At the end of the day, what you always need to take into consideration is that you align everyone's interest. And it's also a consideration for us. So, for example, we would never do a deal where we feel like after we've put in money, the founder is diluted so much that it doesn't make money for him or her to continue doing it. So typically what we see a lot is we go into Series A's and the founders only own 40 or 30% of the company, and everything else is being given away to business angels already, which, given that we also need a certain minimum ownership stake, makes it very difficult for us to invest, and then for the founders still to be fully aligned with the mission of the company and stay with the company for another 7-10 years, because those are typically the large outcomes that we're looking for. And so the same is true for the VC, right? You want to make sure that you really matter to the VC and to not just to that one partner or the one principal that you're working with, but to the whole fund. And that means you have to have substantial ownership stake, because you will, as a VC, you think, okay, I will get diluted down further down the line. And so when I own 20% at Series A, until the exit, I maybe own 10%. And I will then regret not having had a bigger ownership stake if it's really successful. Because the companies where we regret the most having not invested more are those that really do well. But because we only invested 5 or 10 million, it doesn't really make that much of a difference to a large fund. So for us, it's really important to have a significant ownership stake so that also we can prioritize it internally and be like, okay, we have a lot of money in here, we own a lot, so if this goes really well, it will be successful for us. And it's also around like how you communicate, right? In terms of the larger ownership stake you have, the more you're also going to spend time with the company, and the more you can really help them, and the more the founder is getting out of you. So I think that's where it's all about alignment between the founder and the fund, and that requires, for some people, 10%, 15%, for others 20%, but it's typically not 5% unless it's like very, very late stage.
Yeah. Let's go a little bit ahead of what we have just discussed. So, Gloria, you see thousands of pitch decks every year. Like I remember you told me that Index probably really has a very, very good overview about what is going on in Europe. How important is a good pitch deck, and what are some of the best practices? And I would also be very curious to learn, what do you personally like a lot about pitch decks?
I would split it up into what the entrepreneur talks about and how the entrepreneur talks about it. So what the entrepreneur talks about, I think a lot of people are focused on the what are you doing, who are you doing it with, who is involved, who are your competitors. So it's all about what and who. What we really like to understand is the why questions. So like, why is it now the right time to do this? Why is your approach innovative? Why are you the right team to do this? Like, what's your background that kind of qualifies you to do exactly this? And so even though we might ask the questions like, what are you doing, or how are you doing it, what we really want to understand is like, why are you doing actually this? Why have you decided to build a company in fintech and not in healthcare? Why are you passionate about it? And then I think the second aspect is how you're presenting it. And there, for me, it's all about conviction and passion of the entrepreneur. So I think we are conviction-driven investors. So we expect the same conviction from the entrepreneurs. Because if the entrepreneur doesn't have the conviction, why should we get conviction about it? And I think the best example for that I have seen is, for example, Johannes, the CEO of Cree, who, when he talks about why he wants to change healthcare and why he wants to do telemedicine, he really is passionate about changing something for the world. He doesn't care about like valuation, whether it's 5% more or less, but he's really thinking about the bigger picture. And that's why his best quality is really to hire talent, because he talks to potential hires, and everyone just wants to work for him and wants to work for the mission. So I think the how someone brings something across in most cases is even more important than like what they are talking about.
Has any founder ever wowed any one of the two of you during a pitch? So what was the wow moment like with the founder?
Ali from Inkit just wowed me with his persistence and his resilience. I told him no, like quite a few times, but he didn't give up, right? And in the end, I told him, look, I have so many other things to do, I don't have time. And he said, one day he stood in front of my door when I came out, and I was actually walking my dog, and he started pitching me again, and I couldn't say I don't have time because my dog was there. So I told him, okay, let's go for this dog walk together. That's the time you have, and if you convince me during this 10-minute dog walk, fine, but that's all you get. And in the end, he convinced me with his conviction and his persistence and resilience.
I think a lot of people will be waiting in front of your door from now on.
I think for us it was when Nikolai from Revolut came to present to us. So we were small investors before. We had put in small amounts of capital in the seed extension round, then hadn't done the A, but then we're looking at the B. And we were kind of, I mean, it wasn't great in terms of revenue. The unit economics were very unproven. But something was like, okay, we have to look at this. Something is happening there, because whenever I told my friends about it and I was using it myself, they like started using it like crazy, and so something was happening there. And we were like talking to him, and the way he talks about product development and how he's thinking about iterating really quickly, there's structure to that, right? And he's killing features like crazy. He's very rigorous around killing features. And it's this kind of product sense that only comes across when you really spend a lot of time on it. Like, it doesn't come across in an interview. You really have to sit down with him for like 2 or 3 hours, and you can just see how he's driven and how he really wants to make this work and how he really wants to be successful. And I've never seen someone with that ambition. He really thinks globally. It's a global product, global from day one. He really cares about his customers. I mean, the engagement numbers that you can see there are just out of this world. And then even though it was like very unproven in terms of monetization, there was something very exceptional about him and the way he's thinking about product, and the way he's really focused on like what's best for the customer at the end of the day, and the way he's data driven around like, okay, I'll introduce this product or this feature, this is what it does with my cohort, this is what it does with my engagement, that I had never seen before. He's really obsessed with like getting this right, and I've never probably seen that much obsession with a founder.
So the world is becoming more flat, and like you guys investing out of the US, but also like having a long-standing track record here in Europe. Does the ownership requirement somehow change from A to B to C round, and do you see like kind of a waterfall?
Yeah, so typically at A, we're fairly strict. It's somewhere as close as possible to 20% ownership, fully diluted. At B, we definitely want, or usually want more than 10% at least, preferably over 15 roundabout, but we're quite flexible. Even today, a Series B can mean anywhere from like 10 to 15 million, up to, I think Revolut was a 66 million Series B. Of course, it's not always that easy to get like a significant ownership in that kind of business at Series B, or if it raises that much capital at the respective valuations. And so we can be quite flexible, I'd say. But of course, if we look into like a Series D or E, we usually don't have more than 5% or 10% ownership, and it's much more like we're not sticking to anything. There, it's more about, do we have conviction that this can be a multi-billion-dollar business? And if that's the case, as long as we can put some capital to work, which is out of our growth fund, so a minimum of $25 million, we would still do it, regardless of whether we would get 6% or 4% ownership.
Thank you very much. We are coming to an end now. Gloria and Christian, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's really been a pleasure.